The evening air in Istanbul felt calm and gentle, carrying the quiet energy of a city that never truly sleeps. The lights from small cafes glowed warmly along the narrow streets, and people moved slowly through the soft golden light. It was the kind of evening that made simple moments feel meaningful. For Barış Arduç, the night felt a little different from usual. He had been busy with work for weeks, moving between scripts, meetings, and long hours on set. Life often felt like a fast train that never stopped. But tonight, there was something else on his mind. Something simple, yet strangely exciting. A first date. Not the kind of date that comes with pressure or grand plans. Just a quiet meeting between two people who had recently started noticing something special in their conversations. The person he was meeting was Elçin Sangu. They had already known each other professionally. Their conversations on set were always easy and natural. Sometimes they laughed over small things, sometimes they talked about films, music, and the little moments that make life interesting. But recently, something in those conversations had begun to feel warmer. Not obvious, not dramatic, just a soft spark. Earlier that day, Barış had spent longer than usual choosing what to wear. Normally, he preferred simple clothes and never thought much about it, but tonight, he checked his reflection more carefully. He smiled slightly at himself. Why am I nervous? He quietly wondered. After all, it was just a dinner. But sometimes the simplest meetings carry the most unknown possibilities. Across the city, Elçin was also getting ready. Her apartment window looked out over the city lights, and she stood there for a moment holding a cup of tea. The evening felt peaceful, but her mind was gently busy with thoughts. She and Barış had always shared an easy friendship. He had a calm presence that made people feel comfortable. He listened carefully when someone spoke, and he had a quiet sense of humor that appeared at unexpected moments. That was one of the things she appreciated about him. He never tried to impress anyone. He simply showed up as himself. Elçin smiled softly as she thought about their many conversations on set. Sometimes they talked between scenes, sometimes during short breaks. The talks were never long, but they always felt genuine. Recently, he had asked her a simple question. Would you like to have dinner one evening when we both have time? No dramatic invitation, just a quiet suggestion. And somehow that made it feel even more sincere. Now, as she chose a light jacket and looked at the mirror, she felt a mix of curiosity and calm excitement. This was not about expectations. It was simply two people giving a moment a chance. Later that evening, Barış arrived first at a small restaurant tucked along a quiet street. The place was known for its warm atmosphere and simple, beautiful food. Soft lights hung above wooden tables, and quiet music played gently in the background. It was the kind of place where conversations could flow naturally. He chose a table near the window and waited. A few minutes later, the door opened. Elçin stepped inside. For a brief second their eyes met, and both of them smiled almost at the same time. There was no awkwardness, just recognition. Barış stood up. Hi, he said warmly. Hi, Elçin replied. They both laughed lightly, noticing how simple the moment felt. Sometimes people imagine first dates as complicated events filled with pressure. But this one felt more like two friends meeting after a long day. They sat down and the waiter brought menus. For a moment they both looked at the pages, but neither seemed very focused on the food. Instead, the conversation began almost immediately. How was your day? Barış asked. Busy, Elçin said with a small laugh. But good. I think I spent half the day repeating the same scene. Barış nodded knowingly. That sounds familiar. They both laughed again. The conversation flowed easily. They talked about filming schedules, funny moments on set, and the strange ways actors sometimes prepare for scenes. At one point, Elçin told a story about a scene where she had accidentally forgotten her line, but kept talking anyway. Barış listened with a wide smile. And no one noticed? He asked. Oh, they noticed, she replied. But they were too polite to stop me. Their laughter filled the table. The food eventually arrived, but the real focus of the evening had already become the conversation. They discovered small things about each other. Barış shared how he sometimes enjoyed quiet walks late at night when the city became peaceful. Elçin talked about how much she loved reading scripts slowly, imagining the emotions behind each scene. Neither of them tried to impress the other. Instead, they simply shared pieces of their everyday lives. And slowly, something warm began to grow between the simple words. Not something loud, not something rushed, just a quiet understanding. At one point, there was a brief pause in the conversation. Not an uncomfortable pause, a comfortable one. Barış looked out the window for a moment at the glowing lights of the street. Then he looked back at Elçin. "I'm really glad we did this," he said honestly. Elçin's smile softened. "Me too." There was something sincere in that moment that neither of them needed to explain. First dates sometimes feel like performances, but this one felt different. It felt real. And as the evening continued, neither of them realized that this simple dinner would become the beginning of something that people would later describe as a beautiful connection. For now, it was simply two people sharing stories, laughter, and a quiet spark that neither of them wanted to rush. Outside, the city lights continued to glow. Inside the small restaurant, their conversation carried on, warm and natural. And somewhere in the quiet space between their words, the first gentle feeling of something deeper had begun.